Hi everyone, my name is Frances and I'm here with Kenra Professional, and I'm super excited. I'm going to show you how we created this beautiful Honey Golden Brunette using a time-saving foil placement that's going to give you a full foil effect. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to get into doing her foil placement for her Honey Brunette. I have her hair parted into 3 different zones. So let's break down these zones. We're going to call the hair that's left down zone 1. This zone is so important. This is where your client sees all of her highlights. So if I'm going to spend any more time in any of the zones, it's going to be in zone 1. So we're going to do a lot of foiling in through here, around the hairline, in the back of the ear, and when your client pulls their hair forward, it's the hair that falls right behind the neck. And then we're also going to talk about zone 2. This is actually where we're going to save time. This is where the client is going to get the most dimension. We are going to do less foiling in her zone 2 because it sits under the top of everything else. And for zone 3, this is our detail zone. We're going to spend a lot of time putting all the little details of her highlighting here. This area is super important because this is how your client's hair is going to naturally fall. When her roots come in, how seamless is it going to look? How much contrast is she going to have? Is she going to have a line of demarcation? So lots of detailing in through here. So just to recap, zone 1, lots of heavy foiling. Zone 2, very minimal, very dimensional. Zone 3, this is where all her detail is going. For this project, we are using Simply Blonde Blue Powder Lightener with 20 volume at a 1:2 mixing ratio. Okay, so starting in zone 1, I'm going to start in the back of the hairline and work my way forward. I'm mainly starting in the back of the hairline because I'm going to make these foils a little bit more dense. So I just want to get those going. They're going to take a little bit longer to process. So what we're first going to do is I want to make sure that my model has some highlights kind of just at her hairline if she pulls her hair up. So I'm going to do kind of a diagonal section here. And let's see, she is a lot more dense up here than she is here. I'm gonna actually tease that out so that we can have a nicer flow of color. So I just did kind of maybe like 20% tease. That will also create a little bit of dimension for her. I'm gonna start maybe 2 inches away from the top. This is where I'm gonna do a full saturation. And then as I get closer to the root, I'm just gonna feather up. This is a great way to create some really soft diffusion. We are gonna go back and root shadow this later, but it also helps the highlight blend from the start. So I always say, start your blending with your highlighting. Don't depend on your toners to do all the work for you. So the teasing mixed with the feathering is just gonna ensure she's gonna have a really soft gradient transition. My model does have ends that are already light, so I don't want to saturate that yet. We're just going to feather through. And then I like to sandwich my foils. I never fold them. What I do is I just fold them on the corners just to secure them. That way we can let the lightener do its thing. Again, in zone 1 is where we spend a little bit more time, so I'm going to do another foil right on top of this one, and we're still going to do this in the diagonal. And I'm not leaving any hair in between in this section. What I am going to do is start creating a weave. That way we can start creating a little bit of dimension, and then I'm also going to get a little bit of dimension from her back combing. Another pro tip if you want really great lift, if the hair is starting to bundle, I like to separate it. If I can't see my foil underneath, I know I might just get a little bit more warmth in my lifting, so I just make sure I can see that foil underneath the hair. Full saturation through the mid, towards the ends, and then feather up. So I usually will do my feathering painting down. You can go this way and just have a light hand with it, but sometimes it starts messing with my back combing, so just so I have a little bit more control, I'm gonna feather down. If you want to make sure you get the underneath, we're going to open the hair from side to side just to make sure if I grabbed a bigger section of hair that's getting full saturation. And her ends are a little bit light, so we're going to kind of keep the integrity of the hair feeling great, so we're just going to pull that off to the side. Still in zone 1, we're going to do 1 section left on this side. Sometimes I will just look at the hair and see what it calls for. It is feeling a little dense here, so I'm going to create that weave. We're going to go a little chunky with the weave so it looks like a little bit more of a ribbon of balayage. And still following through with that back combing. That way she's not as dense up here than she is down here. We want it a little bit fuller in through here. So she's gonna have in the back 3 foils on each side in her zone 1 section. And we're gonna repeat the same thing on this side and then move to the front of zone 1. Okay, just to recap, we have 3 foils on each side in the back, so 6 foils total. We're gonna still continue with our zone 1, where I do spend a little bit more time, but now we're gonna work towards the front of the head, and we're gonna keep up with those diagonal sections. So this is if your client wants a little bit of that face framing highlight. I'm gonna work right around the hairline. And in this section, we're gonna do a baby light. So I'm gonna do a little bit of a light weave here. Usually in this area, I don't like to go too chunky. That way when they pull their hair up, they're not gonna get that line of demarcation. She does have a little bit of that flyaway hair, so I'm gonna just kind of comb that out. Create a little bit of a tease, so if you want a little bit of that diffusion. And keeping up with the same type of application, I'm gonna apply about 1 inch or 2 down, and then we're gonna feather up. That way she has a little soft diffusion at the root area, and then full saturation through the mids and ends. She does have a little bit of highlight into here, so we're gonna just leave that out of the foil. This area where the hair is finer, I know is gonna lift very well, so I'm okay with folding this one up. In my foils, I usually have this little flap I like to put under, that way I can just slide the foil back up if it starts to slip, and then we're gonna lock in the corners. Okay, so next section I'm gonna bring down in her zone 1. I'm gonna start creating a pivot. So this is where I'm gonna do a little bit of time saving while still giving her a lot of highlights in this area. So we're gonna kind of see this, I call it like a pie shape section. It's very fine in through the hairline, and the dimension is coming in through the back. When we start pivoting and fanning our foils on the side of the head, it helps create very tight highlighting in around the hairline and still leaving a little dimension in through here. All around her hairline, I'm just gonna be doing these soft baby-like foils. I wanna create some soft dimension for her versus strong contrast. But this is still gonna allow her to get more of those ribbons of that honey tone going closer to her scalp. Pro tip when you're highlighting, this is something that actually really changed my life behind the chair, is to have a fresh bowl of lightener about every 15 minutes. This really just allows the lightener to do what it has to do. Sometimes if that lightener's been sitting around for too long, it loses its strength. So typically when I'm working, I do half a scoop at a time. We're using Simply Blonde Blue Powder Lightener at a 1:3 ratio. That's just usually my preference. And I usually do half a scoop, and after 15 minutes, I'm already mixing a new bowl of color. So keeping up with my pivot, I think the main thing I'm looking for is that these foils are connecting right in through here, creating that baby light. And also, if you want a little bit of a stronger face frame in your baby light, you can take a thicker piece around the hairline and just still go a little finer right behind it. And I'm gonna tease out some of those little baby hairs. I also, just to kind of keep with my momentum, I do these longer strides when I'm applying. Sometimes I feel like I take longer when I do this all day, and also just to create that even lift, these kind of longer strides give me that full saturation. And the last part of our zone 1 area, we're gonna do right at the hairline. And you can use this method whether you're doing a strong money piece or just something very dainty and subtle. In this area, I will always like to do a very fine highlight. That way when she pulls her hair up, it's soft, it's diffused. And you can either tease away or use a blow dryer to do a little air touch to get those flyaways out the way. This foil is usually like my daintiest because it's right at her hairline. And we never want our clients to have that strong line of demarcation when their hair starts to grow out. These fine areas I'm okay with folding. And then also just for the comfort of the client, keeps the hair out of their face. Okay, so if you do want a strong money piece, I would suggest taking a slice. If you want something stronger and bolder, you can just go with a bigger slice for her, I'm just gonna do a very dainty slice. That way she does have some face framing that sticks out, but I don't want it to just be a significant money piece for the look that we're going for today. And even with the teasing, it is gonna create a little bit of dimension because some of the dimension is being teased up and out of the way and it's not getting highlighted. And depending what this area calls for, this area is a little dense, so what I'm gonna do is end it with a slice here. So if you kind of are entering into a money piece, you wanna find a way to exit out of it. So what I'm gonna do is start exiting out of it into a baby light, and it's gonna connect to my zone 3 foils, which are also gonna be baby light foils. So this area, depending on the canvas you're working on, sometimes I only have to do 1 foil left. On her, we're gonna do 2. We're gonna repeat the same thing on her right side. And that will be the rest of zone 1. Okay, we are all finished with zone 1. So we have 3 foils around the hairline, just kind of right in front of the ear. And then right, we call it the money piece area, but it's still considered zone 1. I also have 3 foils. We have a baby light, 1 slice, and another baby light. So I'm gonna move on to zone 2. Now this is my time saving area. This is where we want to see dimension into the hair. We actually want dimension in this area. So the way I'm going to do it, that's going to help me save time, but still going to help my foils connect and go fluidly. Starting where I left off on this corner, I'm going to diagonal up. And on this foil here, diagonal up. So what I'm trying to avoid doing is back-to-back foils. It's not necessary in this zone. This is where we want to see a little that depth shine through. I'm gonna just switch the direction in which I'm foiling, and I'm gonna still do a baby light on this area in that diagonal form. When I was starting my sectioning in the back of the head, I did kind of a thicker weave, almost like a chunky weave. But as I'm working my way up, they're going to go finer into the hair. So that zone 1 is where I want to see a little bit more of that lightness. And then we're almost kind of transitioning in from a bold effect into a softer effect. So this also allows my client to have a nice grow out. You can also do a ribbon in this area, just whatever it calls for. But since I'm kind of maneuvering my foils into that triangle, whether I go with a baby light, whether I go with a chunk, both are gonna work. I'm mainly paying attention to what's left into the hair. So now I'm on the other side, connecting that triangle together. And if you want more brightness, your client, let's say she had dark all the way through her ends, what I would do in this section is do a tip out. But since she does have a little bit of that lightness, we're just pulling that lightness up. I can leave this area alone, so I'm gonna keep it with my baby light in this zone. So to connect that triangle, now I'm just gonna do 1 horizontal foil, and I'm gonna make sure that this corner connects with this corner in that triangle, and that's gonna ensure that my highlights are flowing together. But what it's gonna do essentially is create depth right in through the middle. And it's gonna create depth right where we need it to be. So here's, you can kind of visibly see that triangle. I'm just gonna make sure the corners of my foils are connecting. And this was still part of zone 2, I just dropped it down. So I think I'm gonna just do 1 foil here, and it's gonna connect to that one, and then we can move on from zone 2. Okay, so we finished with zone 2. Recapping, we have just 3 foils in a triangle placement in the back. I have 1 foil on zone 2 in the front on the left side, and 1 foil in zone 2 on the right side. This is our zone 3. This is where I consider it to add the most detail. However, we have this nice dense area, so I'm gonna continue doing a time-saving foil placement and do that triangle section. So right in through here is basically a diagonal on each side to create that triangle, and then we're going to do horizontal and maybe another horizontal to add that detailing. So we did some bolder weaving in through the bottom. Now we're going finer, and I'm probably even going to give this even more of like a microwave section. Still gonna back comb just to make sure the top isn't too dense. And I want these foils to sit up pretty close to the scalp, so I'm not gonna do too much back combing. I'm still gonna start away from the scalp and feather up. That way it's still gonna be, my application is still gonna have highlights very close to the top, but it's still gonna be softly diffused as it's lifting. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. We have that diagonal section, and then we're gonna finish with 2 horizontal. And this will be her zone 3 in the back of the head. Okay, so we are finishing off on zone 3. This is the crown of the head. So we're still gonna do a little time-saving foiling. However, this is where I am gonna create a little bit more of the detailing. So this is the front hairline near the money piece area into this back section of zone 2. What I'm gonna do is start pivoting, but I also wanna connect this corner to this corner. So next section, I am gonna create a little bit of depth. We have a slight pivot. And the main thing I'm looking for is that each corner of my foils is connecting to another one. That way the flow of color is still gonna be there. So here, I'm gonna do kind of between a weave, like a baby light and a micro weave. I wanna add a little bit more detailing here. We wanna do some soft dimensions, so kind of foiling in more of a micro weave is gonna give us that really soft depth. Little back combing just mainly to create that diffusion and get rid of any flyaways. And I'm still gonna create that soft diffusion at the root. I'm just getting a little bit more detailing in through this area, just making sure it's very close to the scalp, and the weaving is a lot finer than I did in the rest of the hair. This is where my model parts are here, so where the foils are actually connecting is riding through the hairline and connecting to this foil back here. And I'm gonna continue doing a micro weave. And the reason this placement works is because everything at the hairline is connected. So we're gonna have that beautiful flow of highlighting all throughout the hair, but creating depth in areas where depth needs to be. So we have 2 foils in the front of zone 3 on each side. I'm gonna make sure to get close to that root, but still creating that soft diffusion. Okay, we finished her full foil application. So we did the 3 different zones in the back. And the great thing about this technique is it looks like we did a lot of foiling. It is technically a full foil, but instead of doing back-to-back foils, we manipulated the direction of each foil. So in our zones in the back, we just have 3 foils on each side. That zone 1 is the zone where I do the most highlighting. And zone 2 and zone 3 in through the back, we just have triangle sections, giving a total of 14 foils in through the back. But the customization of it looks like a full foil. And finishing off her zones in the front, we have 3 foils here, and we just have 3 foils around the hairline. Total of 8 foils on each side. And again, just changing the direction of your foils, but everything at the hairline is very close together, so she's still gonna have that beautiful flow of highlights and a lot of face framing highlights, but everything's still connecting to the back. So we're just gonna let my model process. I'm just aiming for about 2 to 3 levels lighter than her natural. So we're gonna let her process for a few more minutes, and we'll come back here for toning. Okay, so we're gonna begin by using her shadow root formula. I'm gonna start in the back and work my way forward. And we're gonna just do a little bit of a root tap. And the reason I actually like to start in the back is if this area processes faster, it's just so much easier to rinse this out in the shampoo bowl, and then I can rinse it going towards the front of the head. So I'm gonna drag this down until I see where my highlights had started. In the back, since we did a little bit of teasing, it's dragged down a little further. But what I like to do is in some areas, especially if I still wanna add a little bit more depth, I'll drag it down almost like a low light, but not a full low light, just kind of picking out some areas to bring that Demi down a little deeper. As we move up closer to the top of the crown, I brought these highlights a lot closer to her scalp. So these I'm gonna just do a little bit more of a root tap because I want these to sit up higher. Okay, so we're moving on to the front of her hairline. I do want her front highlights to kind of sit up higher So, and that's just gonna make her highlights stand out a little bit more. So I'm just doing a light root tap in through here, and then I'm gonna actually drag this. It's still very high up, but I'm gonna drag it down a little bit further. And I'm going in with a 6N Demi, because this actually will match the closest to her natural. As we're working at the hairline, we're just gonna do very light root tap. That's gonna be great for your clients who like to wear their hair in ponytails. And the great thing about this is it doesn't have to be so systematic. You can kind of just create your own root shadow, because it is supposed to be a very lived-in, organic look. And right at her front pieces, we're just gonna do the tiniest little root tap. Okay, we just finished the root shadow, so I like to grab a wipe to comb, and what I'm gonna do first is start melting that root shadow down. And I'll also use my fingers to like create a melt, so we're really gonna push the Demi in. This is the great thing about working with cream toners, is they give you a very nice opaque finish, but you really want to melt that through. And so for those areas that I brought the root shadow down further, that's going to create a little bit more soft dimension in through this area so that your root shadow is not sitting in a straight line. And then I'm going to go in with my highlight toner. And again, I'm working in the back first in case I want to rinse this out faster. And I'm not worried about doing section by section. I'm just getting this color on because I know I'm going to take my paddle brush and I'm going to make sure it's all combed through. So head down for me a little bit. Now what I'm going to do to ensure that I have a beautiful blend is I'm going to take that root shadow and I'm going to drag it down. So essentially what we're doing is creating a gradient of color. Once that root shadow melts into the lighter formula, we're almost getting an in-between transition color. Okay, so moving on to the front, I'm going to start melting the same way I applied. So I'm going to just do a slight melt down here, but then we're going to really drag it down right behind it. Again, this is just to break up your line of your application. I want it to kind of melt through very organically, and this is going to allow me to do that. So I'm just going to work side to side, and then I'll do this all over toner at very last around her hairline. And sometimes I'll do a toner overlay if there's areas of the root shadow that I want to deepen. So I'm going to take that root shadow formula, this is the 6N, and I'm just going to kind of overlay it over the highlight toner if I just want to soften it up a bit in some areas. We're going to process from about 15 to 25 minutes and then show you the end result. I'm very excited. Okay, here it is, the beautiful end result to our Honey Golden Brunette. We did a lot of soft microwave highlights, so it gave her a beautiful, organic, lived-in look. Thank you all for joining me. If you were inspired by this look, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Kenra videos.